Welcome to the last panel of today's beautiful event. We're gonna be focusing on revenue operations. Is it a new way forward or is it a just new buzzword? Or it's like Fugazi. Let's see. My and your guest here, Michelle Hulse, she's a director of revenue operations for Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Pax8. It is a global leader of cloud commerce marketplace with over 24 years experience in tech industry, aligning sales operations with, revenue operations with integrating sales, marketing, and experience teams. And she's responsible for driving revenue growth 100% year over year. So our first guest, Michelle. Paweł Nical, he's a revenue expert. He's one of the first Polish expert who was implementing revenue operations in Poland. He's been doing this in Net1, and then he's worked also for BCG globally and doing other globally stuff connected with revenue operations. And our third guest is Dominic Monkhouse. He's a tech founder, famous in Britain for being the best boss to work for driving the culture that people really wanted to work there. And he's also an author of two best-selling books and the author of a podcast. And he's on a mission to demystify the business growth. So again, please welcome the guests. Again, thank you. Okay, guys, I wanna open the discussion to ask you, what in your experience, what in your mind, revenue operation is? Show.
It's a very broad ranging way of saying that you need to align your customer journey across your entire marketing, sales, and experience teams. So looking at how your customer comes into your ecosystem, what is their experience with marketing? What are they told? What they promised? What's that messaging? Versus how you then move them into your sales motion. And again, what are they told? What are they promised? What's that messaging? And then once they've become a customer of yours, what the customer success teams are doing, how are they being delivered to? How do you manage to retain that business? And moving on and turning them into kind of sticky customers, essentially. How can they be advocates for your business? So if you think about it in terms of the way we do it at Pax8, we have a kind of, and it's actually a fairly standard model, the kind of bow tie funnel. So you have at the beginning, you have your kind of how you engage, how you excite, how you bring people through that kind of top of funnel motion through to becoming a customer, and then bringing them through to that kind of more engaged, excites phase again, and then into advocate. How do you make them become part of your business, essentially? And we do that in RevOps through kind of three pillars, essentially, 3 or 4 pillars. Mainly kind of tools. How do your tools line up with one another? How does your CRM pull your partner, pull your customer through that journey? And your processes, if your processes aren't linked together and you haven't got marketing linked in with sales and those handoffs aren't happening properly, then it's going to be a disjointed process. It's going to be a disjointed journey for your partner, your customer, with friction points in there that you just don't need. It's going to cause you problems. And then obviously data is key. And if any of you in this room have cracked that problem, then please do let me know, because in Pax8 we have too much data. We have far too much data, and it's a challenge on how do you use that? How do you find out where your trigger points are and your levers are? What can you use in order to kind of bring that partner through that entire journey and get them to the end of it being an advocate for your business?
All right, thank you.
Yeah, for me, there are many definitions of revenue operations, but what I really like to, how I like to answer this question is with a very simple one in one sentence. I believe revenue operations is connecting the dots between revenue strategy and revenue execution and everything that is between. And in today's complex businesses, we have many dots that need to be connected in order to drive positive customer experience and business growth. Those are people, what Michelle mentioned, a lot of data, tools, and other things. And there needs to be a dedicated function within the business that connects these dots which is aligned both with a strategic direction. That's why it starts with revenue strategy, but then it goes down to revenue execution so that the strategies that we design are executable by our operational functions and by all the go-to-market functions in the business. So yeah, I would define it this way.
All right, thank you. Dom?
Everything about getting a customer and keeping a customer. We tend to work with clients to define a target operating model. So we say, how are you going to get them and how are you going to keep them? And then that tends to be marketing and sales and finance. And unless you have revenue operations running across that, then they're all going to work on their own and you're not going to pull it through.
So I'll come back to the first question. Is it a new way to go forward? The whole conference is about finding new ways to move forward, to find growth levers again. So is revenue operation a new way forward, or is it just a buzzword that's going to go away like, 2025 or something?
No, I don't think it's going to go away. I think it makes sense. It's common sense. You have, and it's what it's not designed to do is, in my opinion, I don't know whether you guys agree, it's not designed to replace marketing operations, sales operations, or your customer success experience teams, operations teams. It's not designed to replace that layer. It's designed to help them work better together. So, traditionally you will have a marketing operations team that are doing all your marketing automation, managing all your campaigns, making sure that all your lead generation work is done within marketing, and that's where it should stay. Revenue operations isn't there to do that. It's there to make sure that there is a link between that work that marketing operations is doing and then moving it into sales, and then sales operations can pick up that mantle. But joining the dots between them has been done by revenue operations. So it's not a team that sits in sales or in marketing or in customer success. Those teams stay, or finance. It's a kind of bridging across across all of them. So I think it is new. It is a bit of a new concept, but if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. You don't have those silos working as silos anymore. You have something that pulls them all together.
Yeah, I would answer that whether it's a new thing. I would say both yes and no. In terms of the official function that is called RevOps, maybe it's arrived in Poland 4 years ago. It was coined maybe 5 years ago in the US. Earlier, we were only thinking about sales operations, marketing operations, CS operations. So we could say that RevOps as a function is something new. But whether earlier companies were doing revenue operations, yes. So in this meaning, it's not a new function because many companies have been doing revenue operations for years, not calling it RevOps. And when I was first starting a RevOps function at Neton, that later got acquired by MangoPay, and I've joined a company where I was at a seed stage. We went for Series A, Series B, and initially when I was hired as head of growth. And I called RevOps function that I later renamed to RevOps, I called it growth management. And I was there to drive business growth. And I think many companies have functions responsible for growth, for commercial, in general, aligning the business functions. And it's really not so much about the name, it's more about the nature of RevOps, which should be looking cross-functionally across all go-to-market teams, sales, marketing, customer success, not at those separately as silos and not being reporting to just one function, because then you cannot connect those dots because you're biased, right? So I think in terms of this concept, it's becoming more and more popular. There have been companies that have been doing it for years, not calling it RevOps. I think now with this term being coined more and more, it's becoming more popular across the companies, especially in the SaaS space. But it's good to see that also many software houses, agencies, and many other industries are starting to implement RevOps as well. So I think in these terms, there is something new coming, and we should definitely keep it growing.
I think in lots of organizations, that silo thing, marketing say, we're doing our job, we're creating leads, and sales say, but they're all shit. And that's why we didn't ring them up. And so in joined up organizations, somebody needs to take responsibility for making sure there's one version of the truth. And RevOps gives you that one version of the truth. And people stop wasting their time.
So you agree it's not going away?
No.
It stays. All right.
I think it
So
can
I think because it solves a problem.
yeah. So who is it for? Like, is it any kind of industry? Is it any kind of special business model? The size of the company, or maybe the size of your customer base? Is there a border where it starts to be more efficient or more? You should definitely be doing this, or before some border, you shouldn't be just starting it. What do you think?
Right.
I think if it's at a philosophical level, right? Like before you've got any human being with a job title of RevOps, it all needs to be connected. And so if you can think about that connection and putting that in place at the beginning, then that's really helpful. But at the moment you end up with, a marketing manager and a sales manager in an organization not playing on the same team, then get RevOps in and have one version of the truth playing the same game. Otherwise, it's like 7-year-olds playing football. Johnny comes off and he scored 2 goals and he's very excited, but the team lost 5-2. And that happens in organizations all of the time.
Yeah. I think the earlier you start to build your RevOps function, the easier it is to build the entire go-to-market area in an effective way. Because when you're starting to think about RevOps, when you're calculating, okay, if we have already 100 clients, the complexity grows, we have different functions, let's now start RevOps. The thing is that you need to spend much more time in change management. It just takes months or years of all the tech stack data to be aligned when it was detached, right? And you need to do a lot of cleanup, but also even I would say on a human level, it's becoming sometimes almost impossible if you're trying to implement RevOps when you're already 200, 300, 400 people company. It's just so much complexity. If you start at a stage where you have several sellers, several marketers, and you start thinking of your company more in a way of a systematic growth, you want to have a scalable business model, then you can already start applying revenue operations principles. And usually those are founders, CEOs that actually should be looking into RevOps and take from RevOps what can help them to drive those companies into more alignment and working together as one revenue team. And I believe like if we would call sales, customer success and marketing a revenue team, then revenue operations is a function that enables this team to work as a team, not as standalone units. And I think it needs to come from the leadership from C-level to adopt RevOps. But then it's very much, I would say, even if you have just several people in your company, you already can start practicing it. But of course, if you go to 50 people and go to market area and you don't have RevOps, you should start asking yourself, oh, maybe I'm already a bit late. I should start doing something about it. So you need to wake up. But I believe that a good moment to start thinking about RevOps as a function and to implement it officially is around having 15 or 20 people in the go-to-market team. So in sales, marketing, customer success, because this complexity starts to need someone who is supporting the complexity, connecting those dots, again, kind of mentioning that, but being a business partner that is aligning both with strategic direction and across the functions to kind of create a team that's working towards the same goals.
So like 20 people, right?
I would say, yeah, it's like a rule of thumb, but I've been building RevOps functions in companies or advising on setting up functions where there were 8 people in go-to-market. And I believe it has its advantages to start earlier. But I would say most of companies that I see when they are starting to implement or think about RevOps is around 15 to 20 people in the go-to-market team.
And what about the customer base size or business model? Is it only for product companies or also for service companies? B2B, B2C.
I think it's so it's traditionally started in the SaaS space. The SaaS space is the ones that have kind of adopted this coined this phrase of RevOps and have started using it. But I think it's actually applicable to quite a lot of industries, quite a lot of business types and business models. I think it's particularly effective in recurring revenue models. So whether that recurring revenue is in the form of of software subscription or services or support or any kind of service-based model where you've got a recurring revenue model, definitely then RevOps comes into its own, because not only have you got to align your sales and marketing, but you've got this success function as well. Because if you don't create those advocates and have got that success piece nailed, then you are going to constantly be going around in the loop of losing sales and losing revenue and having to go back and find the same revenue. Whereas if you can keep your revenue, retain your revenue, then everything that comes in the top of the funnel is kind of upside. And I think, yeah, definitely in that recurring revenue model. But there's no reason why you can't create RevOps for most industries, I don't think, provided you're clear about what it is you want the RevOps team to achieve.
Okay, so I want to ask for PAX 8. When you think about your team, who's on the team? If you could just give us, paint a picture, like how many people, who's on the team, what are they, what are they doing? What are their responsibilities? How does it look like in PAX 8 world? Yeah.
PAX 8 is, so I run the EMEA team, but PAX 8 is an American company. So we have 4 actually RevOps teams globally. We have a corporate team who look after, kind of, it gets more complex now, a corporate team that look after the corporate side of things. Anything that links all the regions together, they are responsible for. So that's things like the overarching CRM. So Salesforce is our CRM of choice, and we have a team that sits at the corporate level that manages that CRM. We have a corporate team that look after things like, I don't know, commissions. So how do we incentivize people? We have a corporate team that look after marketing operations and all those kind of things. Within the regions, we are at different stages of maturity. So that adds another layer of complexity. So the American region is very much more mature than we are. They launched in America. They've been there 12, 13 years. EMEA is 3 years old and APAC's just under 2 years old. So in EMEA, we are linking into that corporate function, but so I have a team of 4, and so 5 actually, and we look after sales ops. Actually, we do have a section of sales ops, which is completely different, is separate from revenue operations. And then I have 2 or 3 heads that look after the CRM side, I think the tools aspect of it. So are the tools helping us to align across sales, marketing, and customer success? And then they link into that corporate function that looks after Salesforce, Marketo, we also run, and a variety of other tools. So are the tools providing the teams, the go-to-market teams, with what they need, or are they providing friction? Because if they're providing friction, then that's going to be a terrible customer journey. So it's understanding what the customer journey looks like from the viewpoint of inside the company, and then taking away those friction points. So, tools, processes, and data tend to be what we've got the pillars as.
Could you think of an example, real life example, like the customer? I mean, we don't need to hear the name, but like, imagine a customer and like, on a daily basis, what is your team doing? Like, you've got sales, marketing, and CS team, but like for this customer, what are you particularly doing? Like,
so marketing operations are responsible for obviously kind of outbound marketing, but the reaction to that marketing then comes into the business. So, for example, we send out, an email campaign, or there is an event or something along those lines. What happens at the end of that is we'll get in marketing qualified leads, essentially. And those leads can be, a customer that we already have has attended the event, and they've gone there and then they've expressed an interest in something other than what they're doing with us already. That lead then has to flow through into the sales team. So we have to make sure that the CRM's there, that the data's there, the salespeople know what to do when that lead comes in and they pick it up. Because it might not be that salesperson that was at that event, but they know that person got there, or they clicked on that email, or whatever they've done. That salesperson then knows what to do with that piece of information from marketing, and can link into the customer and generate that extra revenue that can have come out of that marketing lead. And then they pass on to and then the customer success bit is a bit more woolly, but we've got things like support models, we've got academy. So we put them into training to help themselves essentially. And we've got all sorts of other bits. So they then pass them on to the relevant teams within PAX 8 that can help that partner become more of an advocate for us, because they themselves are growing their own business off of the back of what they're doing with us. So my team makes sure that all of those systems line up, all of those processes line up, that everybody has the right data points at the right time, so that everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it. And in that way, the partner at the end has got what they want, and we've made them an advocate for
Excellent. I mean, I will deep a little bit here. One more question, going deeper. So, why couldn't sales team do it?
Because a good question. Because the sales team are very focused. They're focused on the here and now, is what I find. It's like you said, Dom. They score 2 goals and come off the pitch, go yay, and then we've lost 5-2. So they're very focused on the here and now. Yes, I've won that sale. And then they move on to the next thing. They're not necessarily thinking about where they can go from there, and they're not necessarily thinking about how they can get that lead in. So, and what to do with that piece of information. So it's that kind of education piece of, well, you've got this in, go do this. We're going to tell you we're going to suggest to you what you do next. And here's the data to help you manage that decision process. So yes, they should do, but if that's not aligned, and they don't know what to do with it, and marketing ops aren't going to tell them what to do, because marketing ops are also on the pitch going, yeah, I've scored 2 goals, I've got a lead in. Sales are sitting there going, well, marketing are rubbish, I've not seen anything, because they weren't looking at the pitch when their goals were scored. So it's making sure that everybody knows what everybody else is doing along that chain.
All right, thank you. And Paulo, like if you were to advise a founder company, start building your RevOps team, like where do you start? How do you look at it, the situation?
So I would say I'd start a bit, maybe I'll connect it to the topic of this conference, like that always will not open new doors. So I would say actually that if the question that you asked about the sellers, why they cannot do these things, I'm not saying that innovation cannot come from this function, but because they are so much focused on the execution, they often don't look at a broader strategic picture across different functions and how you can find the synergies to drive more valuable customer experience. And there needs to be in a business a function that is a strategic partner both to the C-level, to the founders, and to those individual functions, and to be able together to create something more than they could do individually. So I believe that the first thing is to really analyze when you're starting to build a RevOps function is, in the beginning, I would start always with the strategy, where we want to get. So I would ask the founder the question, where you want to be in a year from now, in 2 quarters from now, or in like 3 months from now. And then when we have the strategic direction, I would break it down into the points. Okay, so how now we can measure whether we are going in the right direction or not. And I usually start with what I like to call go-to-market OKRs, objectives and key results, for your go-to-market development, because you have one common objective. Then you can split it down into objectives of different teams who are contributing, sales, marketing, customer success, then key results, key metrics that you can measure whether you're going to that direction, and then breaking it down into, I usually build this matrix and have these workshops in which we're identifying what would be the quick wins, and what would be transformational musts, transformational projects, and which maybe initiatives are a waste of time right now because they do not contribute to the strategic direction. In this way, when we start doing it in this way, we can create a RevOps roadmap, but it always starts with the strategy. So you have buy-in from C-level, from the founders, and then you're going down, breaking it into measurable pieces, and then you're creating a roadmap for 1 quarter, for 2 quarters, how to get to driving those results in order to get to where we want to get in the specific time period. So I would say in this way, RevOps is then enabled to drive strategic growth in business and not only be a support function, because there could be an issue, and many RevOps people don't like when someone calls them like just systems admins or a support function. I believe RevOps should be strategic, because only then they can drive impact on revenue. So I would always start with a strategy, and then I would connect it to execution via specific metrics, objectives, and a specific roadmap.
And who's on the team? I mean, do you call people just RevOps manager? Are there also different functions within RevOps?
So maybe telling a bit of a story how I was building RevOps from scratch in a 50 people company where we had like 10 people in the go-to-market. So at Neton, I joined when we were at seed stage. Then at seed stage, I have been a solo RevOps function for maybe 6 months. Then I hired 2 people. And when I was hiring those people, I was hiring generalists. because I wanted to have people who can do both some systems things, analytics, help us to prepare data for the new fundraising process, to analyze what we can optimize, create some processes across those. But the more we started to grow and the complexity started to arise, we then created customer success function, customer engineering, sales engineering, a lot of different functions. Then we needed to start to specialize. And then I started to hire some of the specialists from specific technologies. For example, we had a Salesforce system admin, and that's how he was called because he was specialized in this specific thing. But it came from the need in the business. And I would say there is no one recipe to how you should structure your RevOps team. I could say that there are 5 general areas that usually companies are splitting it into revenue strategy, intelligence, which can be both business intelligence internal and market intelligence external, enablement, all the training, materials, change management, processes, and technology. And these 5 areas, I've been splitting my team into those specific areas, but the names of the roles were very specific to where they were contributing. More generalist functions were just RevOps associates, RevOps managers, but more specialist functions, they were focusing on, for example, market intelligence researchers, or they were systems administrators, right? So I think it really depends. And when the company grows, it specializes more and more. So you then have specific areas within the team, but it's super important that everyone is working cross-functionally across sales, marketing, customer success, not to build the silos internally where we want to break the silos. You need to be also, on a check not to do it internally in your own team.
So, Tom, let me ask you 2 questions. First, if you look at how we create and help build a senior team when you want to scale a company, where does RevOps, do they sit with the table on the senior leadership team, or is it, how do you?
I think it depends on the size of the business. I was working with a client last week, and we were looking at some data that his RevOps function had pulled together. Now, they definitely aren't a C-suite title. In fact, I'm not quite sure who they report to inside the organization. But to Michelle's point about sales are focused on the here and now, what they had done is they had worked out that 30% of their pipeline was they're a SaaS business. They provide SaaS technology for small pharma companies who are doing clinical trials. They realized that 30% of their pipeline came from companies with less than 10 seats, and that those 10-seat companies never grew to large ones. And so, you look at sales, and sales aren't focused on what's the quality of this revenue. That's somebody else's problem. Marketing are generating leads, and sales are closing them. But somebody has to step back and go, are we winning the right business? Are we selling to the right customer? Once we've sold to the customer, what happens to them afterwards? How do they scale? And so that RevOps function work was being done in their business. And so they fired their head of sales. And they wiped 30% out of their pipeline because it was business that they didn't want, and they refocused marketing, who thought they were winning, on larger opportunities. And the CEO's taken on the mantle of running the sales organization, and so that without that, they wouldn't have. Without somebody looking across the organization, they wouldn't have seen any of that, any of those problems to fix. And so, that sort of embryonic role, could be in finance, or it could be in. The thing is that if you don't have somebody whose job is RevOps, and you say, well, look, what are some of the things we might need to do? At the minute it's all inbound, but we need to do some outbound. How are we going to do outbound? What's the messaging? What's the team? How do we run some experiments? Well, you wouldn't do that in marketing, and you wouldn't do that in sales, and you might not do that in finance. So unless you call it RevOps, what are you going to do? Quite often companies have got they've got one product, and they need to then think about, well, next year we need to generate 30% more revenue, so we need another product. That product marketing expertise, that's not marketing. That's like we have to look at the external market, and we have to create some products and services, and we've got to work out how we're going to price them, and how we're going to create all of the information so that sales can sell them, and what's the go-to-market messaging. Again, the execution piece is in sales and marketing, but unless you have that and you say, right, we're going to call this RevOps. That's where that work is going to get done. Well, there's nobody to do it because, nobody in your marketing team will have the skills to do that. The salespeople should be selling, so there's nobody there. So unless you put it somewhere. And I think certainly in a smaller business, all of that work is probably in the head of the CEO. And, on their way up to sort of 50 people, they're probably doing all of that work themselves. And so then you end up with probably that first RevOps function could be a direct report to the CEO. Is that
Actually, that's how it happened with me. Like when I was joining Neton in 2020, I was reporting directly to the CEO. And actually what he was trying to do is to scale up the business, but he was busy with also many other things when the company was scaling. So he needed a growth partner. So we called it head of growth initially. But I would say I was a partner both to the CEO and then became a partner to VP of sales, VP of marketing. But I was creating this kind of a safe ground for all of them to meet together and a different perspective, which is not competing with one another, which often happens in marketing and sales. Like sales is blaming marketing for providing not good enough quality leads. And marketing is saying sales doesn't want to collaborate with us on marketing initiative. So what should we do when there is this conflict? Then RevOps can come and can be as a middleman and can talk to those three and have a perspective. And even I would say a mandate from the CEO on what the strategy is, and then can moderate the discussion in the way that we come up with something constructive and that we can drive synergies rather than conflicts and the silos within those teams. So I would say that RevOps is a good function to challenge the status quo, and to become an internal incubator of new functions, of new processes, which are more cross-functional. So they look further than your own function. And I think that's what a challenge is with most of the heads and functions in marketing, sales, customer success. They care very much about their function, and that's what they're hired to do. So that's good. But because of that focus, and it's not necessarily bad, but because of that focus, they cannot see a bigger picture. And CEOs usually see this big picture, and founders, but then they are getting so busy that they need support in realizing that big picture and operationalizing it. And that's where RevOps comes in. It can be a strategic partner to the CEO, to the founders, to the C-level, and then operationalize strategic things on the operational level across the function, having the vision where we are going, but also then how to make it happen, right? So I think.
All right. So like on a daily basis, with daily meetings, weekly meetings, like with our meeting rhythm, how does it work? Do they meet all together, 3 teams plus RevOps, or is it RevOps meets only within RevOps team?
Depends on the strategy you're trying to deliver or the problem. Essentially, it's what we're coming up against, the problem you're trying to fix. So with the example of MQLs and marketing qualified leads and sales not responding to them because they don't think they're good enough, but marketing saying, well, sales can't, sales are just being lazy. In that instance, then you're going to get sales and marketing together, but not in a room to hash it out. What you do is say, well, okay, here's the data. What the data is telling us is that these are the marketing qualified leads that are coming through. These are the ones that fit our ideal customer profile. And the ideal customer profile is key at this point, because if you haven't got that, if you don't know what you're going after, how do you know that your leads aren't correct? And that's something that RevOps should facilitate, should say, right, well, marketing, marketing and customer success, join up, tell us what the ideal customer profile is. Who is it that when we bring them into the business is going to generate for us the most valuable revenue? So to your point, Dom, about having customers that generate a couple of pounds each, and then that's it. They stay with you for a long time, but they're only tiny. We identified this within Pax8. We have a lot of partners, a lot of customers, but we identified that 80% of our revenue is coming from 20% of those customers. So those guys there are the guys we want to go after. 80% of our partners, some of them actually cost us money because they're not generating very much revenue for us. And every time they put a support ticket in, they cost us money. So we've got a section of partners, customers that cost us money, and a section of partners that are creating us all the revenue. So what we kind of do is go back to sales and marketing and say, right, marketing, what is this ideal profile look like? These are the guys we want to go after. What does that profile look like? go and focus on those MQLs. And sales, when they come in, these are the ones that we're going to prioritize for you. The ones that are really, really hot and really, really close to our ideal customer profile. We're going to bookmark those for you. We're going to put them right in front of you. Those are the ones that you focus on first, and those are the ones that you go for. And once you've got that kind of lined up, then sales know what's expected of them when they come in, and marketing know what to go find. And then hopefully that harmonizes that whole conversation. So to answer your question, who's in the room, it depends. It really does depend. I have meetings with sales, I have meetings with marketing, I have meetings with all three teams. I have sometimes finance join into the mix because it's we have issues on billing sometimes. So if your billing experience isn't good and partners are struggling or customers are struggling with that, then that's part of customer success. So you bring finance ops to the mix. Is anyone who can impact that customer journey and make it as frictionless as possible, you bring them in and make sure that journey's a really, really good one.
I think if you take Pavel's example, and that's the way I would do it with clients, which is to run it as a series of OKRs.
Yeah.
Then you have that weekly, monthly, quarterly rhythm, and it's just one of the OKRs, and you've got some key results. And then the team that are working on that is whatever the team is, because that's the quarterly focus. And so next quarter, it might be a different group of people in the room.
All right. So let's talk the real numbers, the real impact. So if you come back to your memory and see the company before the company started doing RevOps, and now the companies that you work with doing RevOps, what is the difference? I mean, if you could give us examples before and after, is it worth it? I mean, what is the impact, positive impact?
I just, that example I gave you of the client where, they are, the work that they have done is going to put them in a position that in 2025, they're going to lose money in the first 2 quarters. They're going to be break even in the third quarter, and they're going to be profitable in Q4. That means they don't need to raise any more money, and they get to survive in an environment where a number of their competitors have gone bust, and in an environment for raising money, which is quite tight. So, that the work that they've done in implementing that will mean that they survive. In other clients, I see the same thing. Somebody goes and says, marketing are being very effective, but at the wrong thing. Sales are being very effective at the wrong thing. We need to go and bring products to market. We need to go and sell things. That huge chunks and changes in revenue spikes for clients.
Yeah, I would say that many people are asking what should be the KPIs of RevOps and how to measure, right, the impact of RevOps. This is a bit of a tricky question, and I've been discussing with many RevOps professionals both in Europe and in the United States, and I figured out many RevOps professionals, thought leaders, advisors. They all don't agree on one kind of definition, what should be a KPI of RevOps, and why it's so challenging to kind of, measure it to such a detailed extent, because RevOps is a partner function, an enablement function that is working through other functions. So you can enable sales to sell more, and there are specific initiatives. And I think what Dom mentioned, I would do it in the same way, and that's how I've been practicing it. How to show the impact of RevOps is not to set specific KPIs. We could say the easiest one, it should be revenue, right? Okay, so if it's revenue is in the name of revenue operations, let's put revenue growth as the targets, right? And that's where some genius ideas. Let's do revenue, 50% growth, month over month, year over year. And you say then that it's a responsibility of RevOps. And what then? Salespeople think, okay, so now RevOps will be generating this, so we don't need to do anything, right? So why it's so tricky? Because you need to look at it that RevOps is adding, is creating synergies across those functions to generate better. And I would say there are 4 levers of revenue growth that RevOps can impact and that are measurable. And these are volume, value, velocity, and conversion. So if we look at the equation here, it's also called sometimes revenue velocity, sales velocity formula. You have volume is, let's say, the number of opportunities that you have, right, in the pipeline. Then you have value, which is deal size, annual contract value, whether it's, if it's 1,000 or 10,000, you're starting new product or new service, then you can impact it tremendously, right? And if you bring it to life, then you have conversions. If you had conversions of just 1% on a specific part of the funnel, now it's 5%, the impact is huge. And if you multiply it, and then you have a time element like velocity, which is what is, for example, the length of your sales cycle. This is how you can break down different initiatives that RevOps is contributing to. And let's say we had conversion of 2% here. We want to go to 3% of conversion from this stage to that stage, right? And this could be more in a form of OKR because it's something we want to improve, we want to change. And then you can see whether this change was observed. And you see it then in the KPIs of the entire go-to-market team, in the KPIs of sales, marketing, customer success. But I think for RevOps, it should be a goal for 3 months, for 6 months to help to enable it to improve where we have revenue leakage, for example, and some poor performance. We want to repair it and move to another priority. That's the RevOps roadmap. I think those priorities are changing. So I would say in this half of a year, this 2 quarters, the impact of RevOps could be this much on revenue. The next 2 quarters could be more on profitability and decreasing the customer acquisition cost. The next one, it could be supporting the next funding round, right? Or launching a new go-to-market motions, let's say product-led growth, if you haven't had it, which will not be profitable in the, let's say, 1 year to come because it's new and we need to establish it. But still, it's an impact on the business, right? So that's how I would see it.
Any specific example comes to mind with the companies you work with? Like, they did it and they really saw it.
So, I suppose the examples are on the back of the data analysis. And so there was a data analysis, gave us a hypothesis, we went and tested it. So I've got clients who've reduced their cost of acquisition in half, right? So that's meaningful to them. I've got other clients who they looked at the sales performance, and a number of sellers were using that sort of same number of opportunities, average order value, close time, looking at that sort of deal velocity. Some of their sellers were getting there in the same number, but in a different way. Somebody was selling a lot of small deals, somebody selling a smaller number of high value deals. Well, how do you then take that the thing that the transactional person is doing really well, how do you help them increase the average order value, but maybe without reducing the number of deals? And so, you put that into a sales team. Actually, what they did is they said, so they did some work there, but they also said, our time to respond is too high, right? So we've got one client where the data shows if you respond to a lead in 5 minutes, it improves the close rate by 85%. Right. And what they were doing is they were just not giving that any attention. So you just absolutely dive into that and go, right, we want to talk to anyone who raises a hand and says they want something from us. Like within 5 minutes, we need to be on the phone to them before they've moved on to thinking about getting a quote from a competitor. And that 85% improvement in close rate is huge. You're not spending any more money. Nobody has to work any harder. You just have to say, we've done some analysis and this is what it shows. Let's test to see if this works.
So Michelle, how is revenue operation critical to being able to grow 100% year over year? Where's the secret?
Ooh, wish I knew. No, I think it's in. So when I came into Pax8, so I've been there 3 years now. When I came in, it was a case of marketing would buy some leads from somewhere. They would go out and they'd purchase a lead list from somewhere. It would get dumped into our CRM. Salespeople would churn through it, just keep churning, next one in the list or whatever. And then we would, it's a bit like trying to find a needle in a haystack, essentially. You'd go and find that needle and then you'd grow it and, create an account out of it. What revenue operations has done is come in and said, well, hang on a minute, we can't keep just diving into this haystack. So we created that kind of segmentation, that ideal partner profile. So now we can identify which ones of these leads are going to be useful or not. And we've done that by saying, right, well, we need to enrich the data in the leads. We need to go find somebody who can help us segment the partners. So we did that, went to market and did that. So now whenever a lead comes into our system, it's scored automatically from A1 to A6. A1 leads are the ones that we really, really like. And along the lines of, and then once you've got an MQL coming in, if it's an MQL, if they've started interacting with our marketing, and they're in A1s, well, now you really know to go after them. So instead of throwing more heads at the problem, which is what we were doing, because we have an awful lot of leads, and we're very lucky we've gone out and bought all these leads, we were employing new salespeople. Every month we had 10 new salespeople coming in to try and get through this list of leads. Instead of doing that, we've now said, well, actually, why don't we look at the data? Why don't we try and use the data, segment the data, get it useful for us? And now we're just doing more with less. We haven't recruited a salesperson in the UK. We haven't had to for a while, but we're still growing month over month, growing our revenue month over month, and we're still signing up customers month over month, same number of customers. And then on the kind of account management side, that segmentation flows through. So once they're, because we can't tell what they're going to be until they kind of become a customer. So that's a kind of projected score. Once they get into our ecosystem, we then put them through actual scoring. We've now got data that we can use to say, right, well, this partner is now in our kind of A4 bracket. But actually, we think that they could be an A1 partner because of the data that we've got. Let's go spend some time on them and growing them through our system. If our data tells us actually, no, they're going to probably still hang around the A4 line because they're only a one-man band, or they're not spending an awful lot on SaaS, or they've only got 10 end customers themselves, then we'll stick them in an A4 and we'll put them with an account manager that could still help them, but isn't a very expensive account manager. So what we did last year was replan all of the accounts, put them into territories, and now I've got a set of account managers that are kind of our top account managers, the ones that cost us a fair bit of money, to be honest, but they're the ones that focus on our big clients. So those 5-6 account managers have got 80% of the revenue, and they make sure that that revenue stays with us and it stays sticky. And anything that comes through, they are experienced enough and seasoned enough salespeople to be able to do something with that account. Whereas all the other accounts sit with maybe CAMs that are just still coming through the ranks, account managers that are coming through the ranks and are still learning their trade, if you like. So they're not quite as expensive, but they're there to look after those other partners. On top of that, as at a corporate level, what they've done is taken that a step further and put the segmentation into the customer side. So that what we've now done is recently just launched what we call Voyager Alliance. So it's our partners, our customers now have a tier in themselves, so they know what tier they're in. And then as they move up the tiers, they unlock things that they can access within PAX 8. So, our entry tier, we've made a very bold move to start charging for access to our platform. It's a really small amount. It's a bit like a Netflix charge. But, if you really want to do business with us, then we're going to charge you to do that unless you're generating a certain amount of revenue to make it worth our while. And then once they move on to the next level, that charge goes away and they can start doing things like accessing support, accessing our academy, being invited to our events, being VIPs at our event if you're up in the, the top layer. So, but like a loyalty, like a British Airways executive club, the more you spend with us, the more we'll interact with you. So through that whole journey, we started segmenting at our kind of lead level, and now we've moved all the way through to segmenting at this level to really enhance that kind of partner journey and make sure that we're putting all our efforts into those customers that are going to really, generate that growth for us.
I like that. It's the same thing OpenAI is doing. If you want to have a higher model, spend more money, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of technology, what is the tech stack for revenue operation people? Like, do they use any special secret, tech to help them?
I think there are emerging technologies that can enable revenue operations teams themselves. But I would say, even before I jump into that part, I would say that RevOps should be working on the technologies that our go-to-market teams are working as well. They can have some dedicated tools for themselves. But the thing with technologies is, and I used to work with companies where we've been doing digital transformation and we've been implementing CRMs dedicated for customer success. And we've been, for example, having 3 different CRMs across 3 different functions. We had HubSpot for marketing, Salesforce for sales, and Totango for customer success. And to be honest, for us, it was a nightmare to integrate the data flow. Even like we had 4 different names for customers across those platforms and the finance platform. And we needed to map all of those. And it was impossible to do any reporting, to have a data-driven decision-making on which things we should focus. So I would say revenue operations should be thinking of the way okay, how do we now build up a CRM for a company that does not only benefit those individual functions and their preferences, because of course, marketing preferred more HubSpot because HubSpot comes from the marketing platform, and then they added sales. Salesforce, you can tell by the name, it came from the sales function. So usually you have a big sales cloud, but marketing and customer success are not finding themselves there. So you need to customize, you need to adapt. And what RevOps can come and do, I would say any technology, it accelerates the process that you have in place. If your process is equals 0, if you have a bad process and you accelerate with a technology which is 10 out of 10, great technology, it's still 0, right? 0 times 10 equals 0. But if you have a process that is, let's say, 5, and then you accelerate it with the right technology, it's 50, right? 10 times 10, 100. So we can really have here the exponential impact on the effectiveness, on how we are driving the growth across the teams. But I would say usually process should come first, then technology. Sometimes technology can also inspire the good processes. And maybe it's not very directly connected to your initial questions, but then that I would say I would always start with seeing what are the needs of the business first, mapping out those needs, and then seeing with what technologies we could build the tech stack that is uniting all of us together, that is becoming what also Dom was mentioning, like a single source of truth. Maybe it's, it's not possible to get a single source of truth, but to get close to that we at least have the aligned source of truth that we can drag the data and also have, for example, handover between marketing and sales should not be a nightmare for the customer and for internal teams. It should be smooth, right? So we need to ensure that the technology we are applying, it's supporting the right processes and not the other way around to try to push processes into the tech stack that we've purchased for 1 year. And now we need to commit to this. Like we need to do things that make sense. And that's where I would always start. And then there are many technologies that we can use, but maybe we can just talk about
throw some.
Okay, so
some names.
Yeah, I'm currently, for example, I'm super excited about one technology that is emerging a lot. It's Clay. I'm also now leading the Clay community here in Poland and in Europe. And what's amazing about this specific tool is that it's an integrator. I think it's very much aligned with what RevOps is doing because it integrates many data sources, technologies, automating stuff in a way that allows to align inbound, outbound, and RevOps into what I like to call all-bound operations. Usually, traditionally, we tend to look at inbound leads coming to us via, website, marketing separately, outbound separately, and then RevOps, as a function operationally enabling it. But actually, with these types of technologies, you can do the sourcing of the data, you can score this data, you can do routing to the right people, you can automate things, and even use LLM models to do real-time web scraping and source your own primary data and align it all. And if you have a skilled RevOps person or a go-to-market engineer who can operate tools like Clay, what they can do, they can embed AI, automation, and 70 different data sources with just one tool. It's like also a marketplace for all different technologies, and create a puzzle that you put into existing processes that need accelerating, right? But these technologies, what they help, I would say, they're a bit like a superpowers now for RevOps. Earlier, you needed to purchase 10 different licenses like ZoomInfo, Apollo, others, and you needed to pay usually very expensive 12-month licenses for those tools. But now you can have access to Clay, which gives you access to more than 100 different data sources, including, like Clearbeats, Built With, and other things. Standalone licenses cost you like $500. Here you can just use on a credit basis. So I would say we're in the times where there is a revolution across tech stack, where you have more and more of data and tools democratization, and you can just plug in what you need for specific processes. And I think for RevOps, it's a perfect time now because you don't need to stick to technology and align strategy and processes to the tech stack you have because, we paid for it, so we need to use it. Now you can actually do it the other way around. What makes sense for the business, you go to tools like Clay, Make, Zapier, you automate things together, and then you integrate it with the places where those go-to-market functions operate. For example, Slack. You can create Slack notifications for the sellers, not to create another tool for them to track, but just to put it where their execution is. Is it CRM? Is it their mailbox? Is it Slack? You can integrate those tools via automations there, and via AI, you can bring much more context into this, being really an enabler and creating copilots for your go-to-market functions using technologies like that. So I think that's the future. And really, we are undergoing transformation in RevOps as well, and how we approach transforming the go-to-market with these new technologies. And AI, automation, and data democratization, these three things are playing a key role in that.
I hear this word, AI. So what is the thing that AI will not be able to replace within RevOps?
Not be able to replace.
I think anything which is creative. So it can definitely do a lot of heavy lifting, but making a decision about, what's our positioning, what is it that we're selling to somebody, understanding the marketplace. When a founder starts a business, they have an intrinsic understanding of the problem they're solving and the customer, and then they make a bet. They make a bet on that. And then over time, the organization then needs to start to build a muscle for the next piece of revenue or the next type of customer. And I think AI can help you with some analysis, but it doesn't do that creativity. Making something in the future that doesn't exist today is not what it's about. Those LLMs are about analyzing the past. So if you want to repeat the past, then that's great. But if you want to do something different, something creative, that's not AI.
It's like you said at the beginning, Pavel, I think RevOps is a strategic function. It's not, even though it's called revenue operations, it's a strategic function, and AI is not going to be able to create a strategy for you off the basis of, like you said, what's happened in the past. What AI can do is provide efficiencies for you. So we were talking about tech just now, and I think the thing with tech is when we don't necessarily use a specific piece of tech, what we have to do is make sure that the tech stack makes sense and it talks to one another. But Salesforce, for instance, is very keen on bringing AI in. And we've just launched conversational intelligence. We had conversational intelligence before with Chorus. And what conversational intelligence can do is bring the telephone conversations, the meetings that your salespeople are having with your customers, and bring the insights from those meetings using all sorts of trigger words and all sorts of clever AI functionality, deliver not only a summary of that meeting, saves on salesperson's time. It means that, everyone's got the same outcome from the meeting, but also delivers insights and kind of whatever the customer's thinking to customer success, to marketing. Go replicate what we did here because this customer said that was a really good thing. Or don't do that again because the customer said that was a really bad thing. So you can get those insights and deliver them to the rest of the business without having to involve the salesperson that was on the end of that call. Brilliant. That's where you gain efficiencies. But it's not going to be able to tell us in RevOps what to do with those insights. It's just going to be able to deliver them back for us in a much more efficient way than we have before.
Yeah, all right. So I want to ask you also, what's the biggest and the boldest experiment you've tried within RevOps in your history of playing in that field? What is the boldest? And how did it turn out?
That's a bold question.
On the spot. I think mine was definitely restructuring the entire sales team last year and kind of ripping out from underneath them all of their accounts and saying, right, this is, instead of you just getting the next one in the list that comes along, we're now going to bring some structure to this team. And it was met because you've got to bring those hearts and minds along with you as well, haven't you? And it was met with a bit of the trepidation to start with. But once we produced the data and said, this is going to make life easier for you because we're going to be able to set your targets easier because we're going to be able to predict what volumes are going to be coming through. You're going to be able to earn your commission a bit easier. And actually what's happened now is we were having people that were not earning any commission at all, and people were shooting through their targets and, costing us a fortune in commission. Now we've achieved the kind of bell curve of everyone being between 80 and 120%. Sales on their own would never have been able to do that because why would they? But us coming along as RevOps and saying, right, well, we're going to be restructuring this. Sales partners, customer success are happier because we've got our biggest partners being looked after by our most senior account managers, as opposed to them just being dotted all over the place and kind of luck of the draw. And we've been able to really structure how we set targets and everything else. So it was bold because it involved a lot of movement. It involved a lot of kind of persuading hearts and minds that this was the right thing to do. But it's worked.
All right.
Just got one quick example where the team had historically, if they were behind target, they would get another lead. And there was no mechanism in place to stop salespeople asking for another lead. And so the poorest salespeople burned through twice as many leads as the most successful people. And so we said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We've worked out that these leads have a value, and they have and so you can only draw down as many leads as you should be able to hit your number. And if you haven't closed them, you need to keep working them. We're not going to give you any more leads. So the salespeople had a lead allocation on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And so that meant that sales revenue went up. The other thing we said we don't believe our salespeople are the best people that we could hire. So we said, from a sort of A, B, C perspective, we said, we have no A players in our business. And currently, to be a B player and keep your job, you have to be above the 70% performance line based on historical performance. And so we said, with this new lead flow information, we believe that everybody has the opportunity to be above 70% or above from where they were historically. But that meant that, 3/4 of the sales team were effectively on notice as a result of the work that we did, RevOps work that we did in a client.
How did it turn out?
Well, they're all still there.
All right.
Right. So they're all still there and the revenue's up and they haven't hired any more salespeople.
Yeah.
And so obviously it absolutely terrifies them at the beginning, and it terrifies the business because the business says, well, if we do this, they might all quit. Okay, fine. Well, we'll just hire some more is what I say. But they all stayed and it worked.
Yeah. Right. I think the most bold thing that I've experienced, like in building RevOps functions, it was when I was actually building a RevOps function in-house at Netton. What we've decided to do is to take on also the additional role of being an incubator within the go-to-market area. And what Dom was mentioning, for example, where should product marketing start? It needs to connect marketing and product is outside of the revenue teams, of commercial teams. So what we did, we created a space within the RevOps team to create a product marketing function, like the initial part of it, connecting people from product, from marketing, and some of the capabilities we've had internally. And then even though we had a dedicated person initially for this role, then we spinned it off into a separate function. Similarly with outbound, we didn't have outbound at that point. And then we decided to start outbound. And actually RevOps was taking 90% of responsibility for creating the SDR roles, market research roles. And then we spinned off some of those functions into the outbound team. So the funny thing is that at some point I had a team of 8 people in RevOps, and then it shrank to 6 people in RevOps. And it wasn't due to layoffs, but it was due to the fact that we were incubating functions and then putting them in the company structure. But I think RevOps can also serve as incubation for innovation in the business model and for launching new go-to-market motions and new functions in the company, because it just has this broad skill set, as I mentioned, also generalist function that can take it over for a temporary period. They could start something, they could build an MVP of a business function, and then they can launch it at scale already with dedicated people in the company structure. So I think that's a good experience.
Innovation you mentioned. What was the most creative way you've seen AI being used in RevOps?
Karol, sorry, we are long past the time. So
all right, I don't know. Sorry. So the last question for you. I got it here. So, what's the one questions about RevOps you think nobody is asking but should be?
He's not giving up, is he? Closing remarks, please.
I think if you don't have RevOps, I think certainly if you're a small business or medium-sized business, then that, the way we were talking about it, fitting in with a CEO as an extension of strategy is where to start.
Mm-hmm.
100%. Yeah. Your RevOps team isn't, it shouldn't be part of your revenue team. Ours sits in strategy and operations. So people should be asking where should, when I start my RevOps team, which should be fairly early on, where do we put them? Put them in strategy and operations. That's where we live.
And I would say you should always ask yourself whether, if you're having a RevOps function, whether it drives the change, whether it brings something new and it's challenging the status quo. So I believe RevOps should drive innovation and should be responsible also for change management. If it's remaining the same over a long time, you might ask yourself whether RevOps is strategic, because strategy changes. As we've heard, there are so many changes out there. So strategy needs to change in business on a regular basis. We need to adapt, and RevOps can help to do that. Are we helping RevOps, enabling them to drive this change? That should be the question to ask.
Thank you.